How about now? Hi, everyone. We're just going to get started in 2-3 minutes, just waiting for others to join. So please bear with us.
Hi.
Hello, hello. We have Inma. She's waiting as an attendee as well.
Can you make me host, Ria?
Then can you just make me co-host again?
Yeah. Okay. I think.
Right.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
I'm well. Really well.
Thank you for coming. It's lovely to see you again.
Thank you.
Why don't we wait maybe a minute to wait for everybody to join? How have you been in the meanwhile?
Well, everything is picking up now, I think. I've been very busy because I have been working on some COVID-19 initiatives and especially the first weeks of the pandemic, the EU was really concerned as to how it was spreading. So I was really busy analyzing all kinds of data and talking to every single scientist that I work with everywhere as to, what were they seeing. So it was like a film, like a crazy, crazy Hollywood film. And I think that now we're entering a new phase. I think we know it's here and we need to deal with it. It's a different energy altogether.
Yeah, a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly.
Yeah. Where are you based?
So I normally live in London, but I came to set up my condo in southern Spain for Easter. And then I was locked down here. So, yeah.
Well, I mean,
not a bad place to be.
Circumstances, not a bad place to be. Exactly what I was saying.
No, exactly.
So, Inma, do you need to set up slides? Do I need to?
I have the slides. I wonder if I should put them first in. I think I will put them into presentation mode once I share the screen, and then we can just go from there.
I think I just need to make you co-host to be able to share your screen. So why don't I do that first?
Okay, I am the co-host now.
Perfect.
So just tell me.
Ria, do we want to wait another second? I think we've given, we just had a workshop about an hour ago, or maybe a bit more than an hour ago. And we've given them some homework for the next workshop, which is at 4. So I think many of them are maybe working on that right now as well. But everything is also going to be recorded. So anybody who misses this has the chance to rewatch it later as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we can go ahead and get started if you guys like.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So I leave the floor to you, Inma.
Okay. Right. Let me share the screen. And now I'm going to go like this. Oops. Well, is this thing in presentation mode? Now it is.
Perfect. Yes. I'm still going to be here. So if you need me, just shout. I'm just going to give you the spotlight.
Okay. Let me just move this thing off. Yeah. So ready when you give me the go.
Yeah, we're ready when you are.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for watching. I understand that you're all right in the midst of getting everything pan out as it happens at the beginning of any hackathon. And one of the things that we discussed as to what would be interesting to share with you at this stage of the hackathon would be what exactly is to innovate, what exactly is to create products of the future or products never seen before. And we are now creating products and services in a very, very special decade. It's a decade like no other. I am a scientist, but I have also developed my career creating product innovation at big houses like Nokia and IBM, and also being an entrepreneur. So I know what it is to create things from scratch in a market where there is no market, and you have to kind of evangelize. I was one of the people that pioneered mobile internet, and I was running around London with looking at a screen or a phone and bumping into streetlights. So I know about the hardships of trying to sell to the world something never seen before. So just to inspire you, since you are in creative mode and for a very good cause, which is, how we'll learn to continue our lives in the best we can with COVID. I'm going to share with you something that usually gets people in the mood. And, ooh, my slides apparently are not rolling. Hang on a second. Maybe if I do this. Yes. These two images are very, very interesting. When Ford launched their 4Ts, the first cars that were built in a factory, everyone was still on a horse and carriage. If you look at the picture at the top, there was just one pioneer driving a 4T along Fifth Avenue, whereas everyone else was just continuing with what they've done before. But literally, not even 6 years later, everyone had bought the dream of the car and had ditched the horses and the carriages. And I usually show this picture to kind of give people peace of mind that even if the most audacious scientists and entrepreneurs come to us with products that almost look like the stuff of dreams, human beings have an innate attitude towards adopting brand new things. Adapting to new mediums is the way biological beings survive, by adapting ourselves. So in the era of digitalization, in the era of AI, in the era of robotics, in the era of COVID-19, we will adapt. And that's the hope. That is the hope that we all need to have in mind. So what is COVID? I call COVID the game changer, because although it's a really, really intricate pathogen, like no pathogen we've dealt with before, it has a lot of similarities with the kind of things that happened in our lives today, because it has challenges. It's not like nothing we've seen before, and it's invisible, and it's really fast, and it acts really quick. And before you know it, it's taking over populations. It's one of the things that definitely is turning us into considering how we live, how we work, and what is it that we want to do for the future. It has completely altered life and work and play as we know it. So it's very aching to everything else that we were building. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when I was working on smart city projects, we started to consider that more and more and more the infrastructure that humanity would build would be invisible. Because if you start deploying self-driven cars or intelligent cars, you do not need traffic signs. You do have to lift them up and build something else in the space they occupied. So we move in towards a hugely invisible society, in the sense that things are sentient and running in the background, and we cannot see them, but they're there working. And it's the nature of the digital times that we're living. And it's the nature of something that has grown exponentially, and that is data. When data used to be referred to as big, myself and other AI scientists, which usually we use quite a lot of data for our work. You know, we said, well, data has always been big. Otherwise, what can you do with it? Nothing, right? But big data was like the novelty. And now data is not just big. Data has exascale proportions. Exascale is a computational measure of, you know, how many billion calculations a machine can do per second, and exascale is 1 billion per second of calculations, of data calculations. And just to put you in the perspective of who is using exascale today, well, big oil companies, investment banks, and also people like Andrew Ng, the famous AI scientist that began to train Google image algorithms. And he's now at Baidu building one of the most sophisticated bots that there will be, which is a speech recognition bot. You will call a customer services company and they will talk to you. The bots will talk to you. You will not have to type on a chat. And he commented recently that he was on a 20 exascale parameters of analysis, literally 20 billion data sets per second. And what do you do with that? Well, you bring it down to something that you can apply. And I wanted to show you the mission control that Inditex, the big retailer, has to monitor absolutely everything that happens across all of their brands. Inditex is one of the most data-driven companies. And I don't know if you can read in the back screen, but you can almost see Zara, you know, the screens at the back. And mission control is what we will soon do, you know, in the world of data, in the world of vast and vast amounts of data. What little data sets will be meaningful to us? And this is one of the things that I'm working on with in regards to COVID-19. I'm working on 2 projects in the EU that have to do with disregarding large amount of data and just focusing on data that we can infer, meaning data that we can bring down to a reality that then we can build up a mobile app or something people will use. So we're moving from vast amounts of something to very immediate and local realities. So when you work on this project and you're considering, you know, finding a solution for the COVID recovery, always think that something has to have a innate, local, very immediate life and reality and purpose. Otherwise, it will not take off. It will not be understood. And why this decade is a decade like no other is because in the sciences, we have managed to arrive at a cusp, at a point in which science now is leaping forward, not just progressing in a linear way, but exponentially. And I call it the scientific splendor. And the scientific splendor is after centuries of wondering and pondering what the universe is, what is a gravitational force, how can we cure malaria, all of these things that scientists constantly think about. We have managed to get to a point in which we can take control of the outside and be co-creators and imbue ourselves into its very nature. So some students at Imperial are creating new molecules. We can create new biomaterials in zero gravity aboard the International Space Station. We can modify genomes. This is what we're trying to do with this virus. You know, we're trying to get down to its genome and then try to modify it. So if we are co-creators of the big universe, this is a new paradigm, very, very different to what we had in the 20th century, where we still didn't have the tools to become the kind of masters of the universe. And one of the best examples to understand this is when Professor Kip Thorne was awarded the Nobel Prize for Physics. This is a man that got the Nobel Prize at 74 years of age. I met him the year after in Beijing, and he dedicated his entire life to prove Einstein. That is what he did since he was a young man. And he founded a laboratory called Logan that has 2 sites in America, one in Washington and one in Missouri. And it's like a massive connected lab that constantly monitors and watches the universe, looking for black holes. You know, this is like the black holes warriors. And he was one of the scientists that consulted with Christopher Nolan, the director of Interstellar. Why I call this scientific alchemy is because many people, when they watched the film, they thought that all of those going through black holes, all the stuff that happens in the film were like basically, you know, fiction. And Dr. Thorne wrote a book proving and explaining that all of that, it is possible. It is possible. And that's where we are. There's going to be a big jump in this century from what used to be considered theoretical, which is what Einstein did. He got the Nobel Prize in 1921, because of his contributions to the theoretical sphere. But we will be able to actually do it. And it's a huge, huge jump for humanity to be living in that kind of dimensions. God knows what we'll be able to create. So the difference between this century and the past, and the difference between the innovation that we will create from now on and those that were created in the past, in the 20th century, come with flavors and attitudes that are radically different. For example, up until, you know, the first 10 years of the 21st century, we used to measure progress by the number of patents. The number of patents and the number of inventions accounted, you know, so it would be this huge database per country, data patents filed. And then we would say, well, the 20th century innovated even more because we achieved X number of patents. When 2014 arrived, not only we surpassed all of the patents and the inventions of the 100 years before in just 14 years, we actually went and had a huge number of additional patents to add. And what does that mean? That if innovation was a numbers game, we already beat it. Innovation is not a numbers game. Innovation is about adding value to the world. It's not about filing patents. Brompton Bikes, which is this lovely bicycle that I'm showing you, doesn't own any patents. Every single piece of the bicycle is bespoke. I think when the CEO Will explained it to me, he said there's about 900, 800 pieces to the bike, and absolutely each one has its own non-industrial, non-standard measures. That's how we create our defendability. That's how we create our attributes for competitive advantage. So this is the end of patent. Society is moving from a society that quantified to a society that appreciates qualifying the quality, the abstract, the value that is abstract. And same thing happened in banking. All of the banking challengers, they were never about money. They were never about cash in accounts. They were never about saving accounts. They knew that their target audience were millennials that have very little savings and they don't have steady jobs, and you know that money is not the big issue in their lives. Their business was data. Their business was learning what they do with their money. It was never about money like traditional banking. So again, leaving the quantifiable behind, jumping into the abstract. And cybersecurity, which is an industry that I have done work for, also changed. Cybersecurity used to be about moats. You know, you secure firewalls all around this company. No one can get in. It's kind of a, you know, a lost battle. This is actually how the First Order lost the Death Star. Yeah. So we all know that ends up really badly. The 21st century cybersec is these people, their brains, their creative thinking processes, and their teams. The best cybersecurity people I've ever met are extremely imaginative. They think of odds. They come across with hypotheses that seem bizarre. They look at data in ways that nobody's looking at them that way. This is the people that are driving cybersec today, the actual humans, not the firewalls, not the hardware, not the software per se. And this is the innovation that is appearing in the landscape today, human-driven innovation for a human-centric society. So all of these comes because humans created science and progress and civilizations because we were exploring. Nobody knows who this young man is, but if I show you this one, apparently everyone recognizes Darwin. I feel really sorry for this really handsome guy. But this is Darwin when he was 23 and jumped aboard that boat and spent 5 years circumnavigating the world and building all the knowledge that he gathered to build his theories about humanity and where we all come from. He actually went on a voyage. He didn't spend time in a library surrounded by books. He actually imbued himself into it, which is why we are trying to go to Mars. And a big shout out to ETH Zurich, which is one of the universities that Imperial collaborates as well in scientific progresses. But exploring is an immensely brave and physical activity. When Humboldt and Bonpland, a Prussian, German, and a French, decided to join forces, discovering mountain ranges, they look really handsome and posing like for JQ right here, but actually their life was a bit like this. Meeting indigenous tribes, walking on foot about 9,000 kilometers of Central American mountain ranges, volcanoes, and testing on themselves the lack of oxygen at high altitude. This is how they proved that this is what happens, that the atmosphere, the oxygen begins to disappear as you go high up, testing on themselves, just like astronauts aboard the ISS. We have turned the ISS into a massive medical center to understand how can we further the medical world, the medical care, and the inventions that we create to heal ourselves and to look after ourselves. So the nature of innovation in this decade is exploring. And where does exploring comes from? Exploring comes from something that only humans possess. It's called neoteny. And neoteny is a very, very unique curiosity mindset that humans have. All animals, all mammals are curious. This is what keeps them alive. This is what allows them to find food and shelter. But in our case, this is what turned us into who we are, because our curiosity drove us to stand on 2 feet, look into the horizon, and wonder what was behind the mountains and what was across the prairies and onto the other side of oceans. And this is what developed our brain, our neocortex. So I came across this when I was furthering my studies on deep learning, and I began to notice that the human brain and neurophysiology have a lot to do with what we're trying to create with machines, but also what makes us more and more human and more creative, and it's neoteny. And this is what has powered that humanity invented things. Now, the difference between iteration and innovation is huge. Most people don't know it outside of the product creation circles. Everybody thinks that something new is innovative, but it's actually not. The only wheel that is innovative here is the first one, the one made of stone. All the other ones are iterations, meaning we are enhancing the design, we are enhancing the engineering, we are embedding new materials that give better features, better performance, is the world of better. Society up until the beginning of the 21st century was the better society. There was a lot of innovations, but then the majority of the things we did were turning things better. Now, let me show you what some people in the 21st century do with that. They have completely ditched the notion of better, and they completely reimagine everything around us. This is a wheel that is both round and square at the same time. And you may ask yourself, why on earth this wheel is like this? Well, let me show you how it works. Contrarily to normal wheels, it actually spits out any objects, any obstacles in its way. It is the perfect wheel. The paradigm is shifted. Rather than putting that wheel on hydraulics, like a mountain bike, so that you actually go over the objects and the obstacles, this one actually swipes them off your path. This is how 21st century innovators think. Nothing is unchallenged. They will reinvent, they will redesign everything, even kitchen objects, lamps as we know it. Nothing is going to stop them for finding the perfect new version of something. You know, the applied sciences is what we're living today. And what are we seeing? Well, we're seeing companies in Scotland and in Spain that 3D print entire rocket engines so that they can achieve, you know, the perfect combustion engine, you know, because it's not welded, nothing is going to escape, you know, so it's perfect, you know. And not only that, because bioengineers are creating biomaterials, complete brand new substances with which to print, we're now conceiving objects that are changing because of thermodynamics. So if the temperature rises or the temperature lowers, these structures will contract or expand, and we're using them in architecture, we're using them in the medical world to actually implant them into people's bodies. This is where we're going, into a direction where there are no barriers because we finally have the tools. Think about that. We were not in that position 20 years ago. And tech farming, which used to sound extremely unattractive, is now beginning to make inroads into our daily lives. Most people don't know that quite a lot of the leafy greens that they eat in their salads in Europe are growing in hydroponic farms. In the UK, there is a very famous company called Ocado that has invested heavily in this type of farming and in creating platforms that are automated to be able to deliver these vegetables, but also to look after them. You know, tech farming is not only a necessity, but it will be one of the things that will change also how we grow our food and what kind of food we will be eating. Probably food that will not grow on Earth, because in hydroponics, you just need LED lights and water, and that's it. And communications. Everyone knows what 5G delivers. Super connections. Of course, we all binge on Netflix, but it's also changing the way we manage farms, look after cattle. You know, we can get data from a field and know exactly what is happening. But space is also opening to bigger communications than 5G, which is based on digging the roads and putting fiber optic in it, is little nano satellites that will allow us to have connections in the middle of the ocean, on top of a mountain, and in the middle of the desert. African countries are heavily investing in launching these nanosats because of their geographies and because of their, poor infrastructures, they need to jump immediately into this kind of telecommunications right now. They're not going to go through fiber optic. They will go above 5G and then go straight into nanosat Wi-Fi. So many of these things are possible because we began to teach machines how to think. And COVID has proven to the world that AI can be a force for good. It is thanks to scientists like myself that got the phone call, like, look at this data, tell me what you think is happening. And I remember that since February, I was looking at pandemic data and how it was moving across from China. We have made data and AI one of the best tools to fight this pandemic, but also to extract value, much better value, from other sectors that were beginning to go into very dark places, like pharmaceutical companies, spending 2 billion and 10 years per drug therapy developed, and diagnosis, etc., etc. I always try to explain that machines are what you make them be, kind of like children. If you bring up beautiful, well-behaved children rather than brats, the future is good. And the same thing with AI. It's something that is a tool, and it depends how you use it. It can be for good or it can be for our demise. So what we do with AI, of course, visualizations. This is actually a real image that I got from British Petroleum. This is exactly what they use to do introspections and prospecting, how they're going to exploit a certain geographical area. Or in the car industry where I have worked, nobody builds a real car and puts it in a wind tunnel anymore. It costs an arm and a leg to get those wind tunnels functioning in terms of electricity. We do simulations. We stress the cars with massive physical forces that we would never be able to recreate in the factory for real. And this is how we are moving towards making them safer and better, and a real tool for us to live in better ways. And my favorite one, the human eye is so easy to trick. I always tell people this is why magicians have jobs. I mean, our little eyes are something, that we shouldn't trust on a daily basis, let alone use them to detect cancer markers. You want machines to tell you they are infallible. They can just see a millimeter difference, and then they know what's going on. Not a human doctor. Human doctor will create your therapy, will give you comfort, will give you information. It will give you everything else, but the actual diagnosis will be done by an AI system. And one of my favorite things is what has happened to veterinary care. And look at how the world is changing. We now care for the pain of animals. I've been waiting for this moment. We are developing facial recognition techniques to understand what is happening with animals. Are they in pain? Because they just don't tell us. They cannot talk our language. I spoke in February at a veterinary conference about these type of practices. And one of the things that every single veterinarian concludes is you cannot diagnose cats by how they look. They have the same face all the time, whether they're happy or they're in pain or they're actually really annoyed with you. So this is how the world is moving towards. We now care for the pain of animals, and we will deploy AI to actually figure it out. So advances also contain huge ethical condiments in the new society. And of course, something that we have seen right now live on everyone's television, how the pharma companies are accelerating drug therapy delivery by using AI. This is something that I have been part of since 5 years ago. Some of my students were delivering this type of models to actually create drugs in record time, and also in simulations, and with a lot less funding than what you really need for petri dish-based laboratories. So where we're heading is a society that will pair up extreme technological advances and our creative thinking. And this is one of the best examples that I have to kind of share this notion with audiences. Callaway, 2 years ago, decided to give an AI system a go at designing their driver faces. So if you play golf, this is the big golf club that you use to actually whack the ball as far as you can go. And these three, the first from the left, are the ones that the humans designed. And the one on the right is what the AI system designed. Now, how does a machine design something? Well, you give the machine physical and physics dynamics parameters. It's all math. The machine didn't become Salvador Dali. What the machine did is take the challenge and solve it computationally. So these flash faces, what they do is they manage the coefficient of restitution, meaning on the one hand, you're going to whack that ball as hard as you can, and on the other, the ball has to be flexible and fly across, and then farther and farther and farther away. It's how it recovers its shape in the air and actually advances in the air. So the future is all about these tiny examples in which we collaborate rather than become antagonistic forces. The machines will not take your job. The machines will allow you to do your job much better. So what happened to Garry Kasparov when he lost was the best thing that could ever happen to us. And I've discussed this with Garry Kasparov himself because he's one of the best known speakers in the AI circuits. And he says that he realized that the machine had won because the machine had seen his mistakes, but machines winning at AlphaGo and at other binary worlds of win, lose, black, white is by sheer computational force brute. This is what machines surpass us because our brains are not made for that. The Mensa society that was created after World War II to detect who could be the leaders of the world based on computational intelligence are now losing the battle in this new century and in this new decade, because this new decade is all about creative thinking. It's all about imagination. It's all about approaches. The computational is more and more and more pushed towards the machines, whereas we are enticed and offered the possibilities of using our creative powers, which is all of the innovations that are emerging come from the human creativity paired up with amazing technology. So we're entering an era of emotional intelligence, not IQ, not IQ. That is anti-human. And yes, you've been training Google's image recognition robots. Only you know which are the status in that image. It's really hard for a machine to know that, but you know it instinctively because that is the power of our brain. Our brains are far superior in many instances to the computational aspects of intelligence. And the name of the game is to acquire cognition. It's not about IQ, it's about understanding what is happening and then knowing what we need to be doing. Cognition is the real asset to achieve. This is where we're at with COVID-19 right now. Do we know enough about this virus and how it spreads and who it attacks, and so that we can react to this? That's where we are. This is the most incredible live workshop that humanity has ever had to understand what cognition is. And to share with you an example of this, okay? These are images captured by satellites. Students at the University of Colorado decided to have a look at them, and they started to ponder, could we deduct if ISIS is funded by the oil, by oil exploitation, or by extortion. So by looking at the images, they discovered that since 2014, out of the 85,000 oil rigs that were active, the year after, the number went to 36,000 only active, and then in 2016, it was just merely 15,000. So they concluded ISIS was extorting people rather than knowing how to extract oil and sell it. That is how a human adds value. That is not the data, not the images. A human comes along and creates a super creative hypothesis that the machines help this person discover. That's the pairing, your creativity and the incredible tools that we have access to right now. This is what Boston did. The city of Boston is a super data city in which everything the mayor and his team do is completely quantified. Everybody can access the website, but it allows them to negotiate better with companies like Uber, with companies like Waze. You know, if you don't serve taxis to poor neighborhoods, we will not let you operate. This is what they did. This is what they did with the data. So it's about empowering ourselves, using our creativity, and then leveraging from this fantastic tool. And why do we do this? Because we need to build a new world. The 20th century world is completely demised. Like I call it the control-alt-delete moment, when you realize that the pillars of the past are no longer what you can build something on. It's a new era, and we need to make it as more humanly possible as possible. And the three pieces of advice I would leave you with for you to consider when you are brainstorming, when you're throwing yourselves into creating these solutions are these. Always think about repurposing. When Fujifilm realized that they could no longer sell film and cameras that were based on film, they looked at all of their patents that had to do with photon manipulation, meaning how the light reflects on surfaces, and they created a company that is stem cell driven, meaning the best creams and cosmetics that protect you from the sun. This is the monster moneymaker for Fujifilm. This is why they didn't go bust like Kodak. And this is how something like that, repurposing patents, has allowed them to become almost a meditech company. Repurposing, always use something for something else. Things are versatile, give them a try. Make the product accessible, meaning it's easy to find, it's easy to build, it's not complicated. Everyone can understand it, you know. This is the version of flat pack. What IKEA started is now a business of building homes that come to you in a flat pack. So make something extremely simple across generations. People should get it. Make it, you know, price target, you know, as low as possible, and make it easy to get their hands on it. You know, it cannot be hard to find. It should be very, very easy to get across. And make it sustainable. I have worked for 2 years now, almost 3, with the European Space Agency. And I wrote a book about how space is becoming a commercial space, a commercial industry. And one of the questions people always ask me is, do you think that Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk are smarter than everyone else at NASA? And, you know, because my goodness, look at these rockets that have, you know, these boosters, and it's almost acrobatics to watch a SpaceX launch. The answer is no. These two companies, especially SpaceX, they are startups. They had to raise money, and therefore budgets are not the budgets that NASA had. So they needed to recover the engines. Is a necessity, but also is the mentality of our century. Sustainability. Don't let anything go to waste. Use every part. And that is what you should look when you create something. Nothing gratuitous. Every feature is there because there is a huge reason for it to be there. Everything has meaning and purpose. Otherwise, people do not understand why something is there. You know, don't let them wander off. Just make it all very simple, very straightforward. And the biggest overarching message from me to you, when I was starting in innovation, I came across something that Frank Zappa, one of the big rockers in the 70s, said. He said, if you don't deviate from the norm, progress is not possible. You have to deviate from the norm. You have to venture out of the path, of the beaten path, and look for creative approaches that no one has dared to think of or even dream of. So this is my message to you. Just give it the biggest shot that you can. Explore wild paths in your thinking. And I hope that you allow yourself this freedom, because come Friday, I look forward so much to seeing everything that you built. Thank you so much.
Imma, thank you so much. I think everybody is thinking that they would be clapping right now, and I'm sure they're probably clapping from their respective homes across the world. That was super interesting. I think we have a couple of questions actually, but I have one question for you as well.
Sure.
So, sorry, I lost my earphone. There we go. So you have obviously experienced the COVID-19 pandemic from a scientist's perspective, and you're the first scientist really that we speak to right now. And you've also advised government. So do you have any insights that you can share from this experience to help everybody who's watching to try and come up with pain points that they should be solving right now and ideating around? So is there an area, for example, or a topic in particular that they should be focusing on, you think?
Well, one of the things that I'm working on, and I would love it if anyone in the cohorts would give it a shot. Right now, because people are the subjects of our worries, you know, this is what governments are thinking of, the people and the economy, right? Well, that's why they can't stop talking about social distancing, okay. Not everything is going to be solved by being 2 meters apart from another human being. We need to start thinking about the spaces that we live. Do they need to change? The spaces outside where we move across, do they need to change? One of the projects I was working on, and I'm still working on it because I think it's definitely going to be one of the ways to solve it, is air filters. When you work in a massive skyscraper or you go to a shopping mall, these massive surfaces have machines that filter the air. They bring air from the outside and then they filter the recycled air inside, right? If you are building a laboratory to build microchips, you get special filters that will not allow not even dust into this room, or a surgery room, etc., etc. So the filters have grades. And one of the things that happened to me when I was calling CEOs around in February, wondering, you know, Norway, what are you guys doing? Swiss. One of them in Switzerland said, we're buying filters, we're upgrading everything. And I thought, what? And I thought, of course, how are we going to go back to work or to cinemas, into buildings that still have the 20th century filters? We need to progress with the times. If the air that we breathe may contain a pathogen, we need to start considering the air that we breathe, the air that we breathe everywhere. When the SARS pandemic in 2002 completely shook Asia, one of my clients was Johnson & Johnson, the famous family-owned company, and they make lots of air products. And they noticed how sales of their products plummeted in Asia, and they couldn't understand it. And I was working at the time in an agency where we were monitoring data on all kinds of human trends. So they said, tell us what's happening. And we discovered that because of the pandemic, for the first time, humans were considering the air that they were breathing may contain things that would kill them. So rather than potpourri, I remember growing up in the US, potpourri, nobody buys it anymore. So we created for them Dettol's, the plugins for the aromatherapy, because you want to heal yourself. So what are the products we're going to create that will help us make the air better? Another project is, if this horrible pathogen drops on surfaces, metal, plastic, cardboard, holy moly, it can live in everything. It's a monster. Well, should we consider creating new industrial coatings that repel pathogens? My invitation is, think about life and about how it's being disruptive, and then find something that it will be easy to solve, but it will be meaningful for people. Meaningful. You just start little by little. You cannot tackle a huge thing. Just start thinking about something very simple that people would appreciate, and give them a sense that, okay, I am protecting myself better. And you start with those little iterations. It can be clothing, it can be the shoes we wear, it can be, just think about where this virus is and where it may interact with us, and what could we do.
I think that's a perfect tip, and I will definitely let you know if somebody tackles anything air related. I will let you know.
Yes.
So we have a couple of questions from the audience, in addition to a few messages saying amazing presentation, fascinating, blah blah blah. So we have a couple of questions.
Sure.
So what institutions should be in place, and how can we use data to better prepare for the next pandemic or global crisis?
Well, that's a great question. The data that we have, so basically the data that I look at every day, is not all the data. You are so right, whoever made this question. The data
From
that
Camila.
Governments are looking at is data that only comes from ministers of health from 195 countries. So every morning from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Central European time, all of this data comes to us, but it's just data produced by governments. And we also, for good measure, check their Twitter accounts just in case they put something there, but it's data from governments. Okay. When I came into the project, I said, we cannot just use these. This is like one data set for me, is what governments are collecting. But there's other information out there. So real AI scientists like myself look at the other data. So for example, some of the best results in understanding the pandemic came from a company in Canada that was analyzing social media from the people. And then they discovered that in October, November, and definitely December, many people in the Wuhan area were talking about pneumonia. When you analyze Facebook, when you analyze any of the social media, you analyze the words, and you start seeing the words, you clean them out of prepositions and articles, you just leave the verbs, the nouns, the adjectives. And when you put that through an NLP system, you start seeing which are the, you know, the words that everybody's saying, and in connection to what. That's called a vector. So the word pneumonia was coming next to Wuhan and was coming next to market. Yeah, you understand? So they concluded there's something going on. This is of concern. So they sent the reports to all governments, scientific institutions, and the World Health Organization by the 31st of December, 2019. So they understood what was happening because they were analyzing not health data, they were analyzing the real life data, the data that comes from the streets. So if you come across data that comes from the real world, that is the most valuable data, because that shows you what's happening to people. This is why aerial photography that comes from satellites has helped, for example, detect human trafficking. You start seeing, in India, there was a project led by a young woman scientist, that she said, why am I seeing all these chimneys in these bizarre places in the jungle? Who's making bricks in the middle of a jungle? This is where these poor enslaved people were forced to work, hidden in jungles making bricks. So we never saw the actual people, but by spotting where these brick factories were, we discover the human trafficking trail. So data that may seem, non-important, sometimes is the one that carries the most meaning. So look for that. Look out.
So interesting. Out of curiosity, how did the WHO respond to being sent this pack of information?
So what happened was, well, basically it came on New Year's Eve. I'm thinking, what were they thinking these
A bit
guys?
late, yeah.
It's to be like everybody's out for, to have champagne. The World Organization took a month to respond. But having said that, you have to understand the chain of events. The first death by COVID was reported on the 9th of January. All before was pneumonia.
Yeah.
And then the 9th of Jan is the first death. The 15th of Jan, the Chinese authorities confirmed that it was transmitted from person to person. And literally 2 weeks after, the World Health Organization declared a health issue of international concern.
Wow, so it's unbelievable that this agency spotted it before even the first death. That's incredible. Yeah. Do you have time for another question?
Yes, of course. Yes?
Amazing. I think this one came out while you were presenting, actually. So Amalola asks, how do we ensure these new technologies are available to everyone and don't cause further inequalities?
Well, one of the things that all of us tech entrepreneurs have done is to make it available. Like the open source is, one of the things I feel the most proud of. If you create a company that is going to build something, of course you have costs in, putting together those teams and, but eventually make the product accessible. We cannot create an unequal society when it comes to healthcare. It's inhumane. And it has nothing to do with capitalistic values, which I believe in. Health and education is something that every human being has the right to, and therefore it should never be turned against them into something unattainable. And in some cases, some companies have paired up with governments, and therefore governments have, funded some of the initial launches. But whatever we create to fight COVID, whether it's protecting people, whether it's curing the disease, has to come to them in a way that it doesn't signify excluding them, because they can't afford it. This is not the world that our generation should be building. This is our moment to really turn the tables and build the world that we think is the one that is worth for humans to living and prosper. We don't need to take cues from the past. This is our chance. And I think that this is what this disease has created. Many entrepreneurs around the world are saying, no, we're going to put our time for free. We're going to share data. We're going to collaborate. This is the best of us. Never have I seen data being shared and trained algorithms, which are a jewel to train, shared across scientific institutes without any thinking of like, oh no, that's our IP. Nobody thought of that. We were so desperate to actually find solutions and answers at the very beginning of the pandemic. And this is your moment to do it. You can change the tables. You can change it. So just grab it. This is your moment.
I think that's honestly a perfect note to end on for everybody watching. So there's no more questions in here. And I think we can end it there. Thank you so much, Inma, for this really, really interesting talks. There's some great comments in the chat box right now. yeah, I will let you know if anybody thinks about air freshening or air filtering
Air
ideas.
care.
But in the meanwhile, thank you so much for being here and for sharing all of these incredible insights with us.
Thank you. And I'll see everyone on Friday when we look at the projects.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Okay.
Inma.
Good luck, everyone.
Have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Bye. Great. So another talk, last talk of the day. I hope you guys enjoyed that. We have one more session today, another networking session. Today it's on brainstorming. So for anybody who didn't attend Peter's tips session, he shared a framework for you to start filling out, a business model canvas of sorts for you to start thinking about your idea in a kind of holistic way. If you guys haven't received that, I can make it available again on the platform. But otherwise, yeah, please think about that a little bit, and then let's meet again in the networking session, because it should be fun. Does anybody have any questions? No? So we did a little bit of team mixing as well, not mixing, but so for everybody that still wasn't in a team, we've created new teams, and I think Ria is in the process of sending those out.
I've sent all those emails out.
Okay.
So please, if you didn't have a team, please check your emails. Email me back, confirm your team. If you were in a team of 2, I have put you in other teams of 2. Please note that you do have to be in a team of at least 3 to 5. So everyone, please check your emails. Please confirm no later than today at 6 p.m. Otherwise, I don't really want to talk about the otherwise because that's always negative stuff. But we're going to stay on a positive note that you're in a great team. Everything's going to be okay. But if you have any questions, concerns, email us back ASAP so we can finalize the team formations.
Cool. So next session is on a different link. So we're going to end this one now, and we will meet again in
One
about
second
an hour.
here. There's a question where
Oh.
the talks from yesterday. If we're just trying to cut and minimize them so you're not just listening to a bunch of nothing for 20 minutes. They should be up later today though. So they will be up, and hopefully they'll be up in the participant resources tab.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Awesome. Sorry, that's all I had.
Great. Okay. Well, message us if you have any more questions on the platform. Cool. I'm going to end this one now. See you guys later. Bye.